Christian women, where are you? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt, and I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. A headline from American Survey Center, which is a affiliation of American Enterprise Institute. From April of 2024, this headline, young women are leaving church in unprecedented numbers. And it goes on to say about how for decades now, America has been seen as sort of exodus from the church, but it's been driven largely by males leaving the church, leaving their faith, leaving behind their Sunday morning obligations to God and so forth. But lately, the trend has reversed, and it's women who are leaving the church, and there are a variety of reasons for that. Namely, if you think about it, it kind of comes down to traditional teachings, traditional church teachings, traditional Bible teachings versus the American dream, right? The two seem in conflict with each other. You're raised to believe you can be all you can be whatever you can be, male, female, in America, it doesn't matter. And then you get to church, and in some churches, women are told to shh, be quiet, submit to your husband, which means in certain definitions, certain skewed definitions, I would say, that you have to just sit quietly by and be obedient and submissive and not have your own opinion. And if you do dare to have your own opinion, to keep it to yourself. And so that's all skewed teaching, of course. Jesus didn't look at women that way. But if you're going to a church that believes that teaches that, or if you read your Bible on your own, like you're supposed to do, and that's your takeaway from certain sections of the Bible, which again is skewed, then it's very difficult to be the American dream type of American and at the same time be a godly child of God, right? As a woman. The two themes seem in conflict with each other. And so no surprise really that it's coming down to women are leaving the church. It's Gen Z women in particular. So before I get into more of that, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network. That is the faith-based news arm of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chino Chapel Hills Church in California. It's a great place to go to get all your faith-based news. Helps you make sense of what's going on in today's world, right? The culture, the politics, the economy, everything, global affairs, everything from a biblical perspective, because in the end, really, that's what matters, right? The biblical view of things. And you can get, of course, Bold and Blunt, as I always mention, at WashingtonTimes.com, where you may subscribe to my Monday, Wednesday, Friday newsletter, Bold and Blunt with Cheryl Chumley. Just go to the website, WashingtonTimes.com, and enter your email address under the newsletter section, and you'll get delivered right to your email box 3 times a week, in time for the lunch hour, usually. My commentaries that I write at the Washington Times, as well as my twice weekly Bold and Blunt podcast, right to your email box. How convenient. You don't have to do a thing. But you can also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. I want to quickly mention, too, I have a new book that just came out. My next nonfiction is called God-Given or Bust, Defeating Marxism and Saving America with Biblical Truths. If nonfiction isn't your thing, but fiction is, well, luckily, I don't know why my tongue's stumbling over that word. I don't know why my tongue isn't working correctly today. Let's just put it this way. Lucky for you, I have a fiction book out there as well. It's called Chloe. It's the first in a series called Chloe's People series. The second one, called Hector, is coming out now. It's available for a pre-order, so you can pick up all those books on my Amazon author page. But let me get back to what's important about women leaving the church. Let me read from this American Survey Center. Again, it came out April of 2024, so it's about a year old, but it's probably still pretty accurate. Women outnumber men among the young adults leaving religion. Over the last 2 decades, which witnessed an explosion of religious disaffiliation, right? The rise of the nuns, remember that? It was men more than women who were abandoning their faith commitments. In fact, for as long as polls that have been conducted on religion, men have consistently demonstrated lower levels of religious engagement, but something has changed. This new survey finds that older Americans who left their childhood religion included a greater share of men than women. In the baby boom generation, 57% of people who disaffiliated were men, while only 43% were women. Gen Z adults have seen this pattern flip. 54% of Gen Z adults who left their formative religion are women, compared to 46% who are men. So why? What's going on here? So this survey goes on to write, feminism, gender, and a cultural mismatch. That's one of the headlines, right? And here's the text. Even as rates of religious disaffiliation have risen, conservative churches have been able to hold on to their members, but they are facing more of an uphill battle keeping this current generation of young women in the pews. 61% of Gen Z women identify as feminist, far greater than women from previous generations. Younger women are more concerned about the unequal treatment of women in American society and are more suspicious of institutions that uphold traditional social arrangements. In a poll, nearly 2/3, or 65% of young women, said they do not believe that churches treat men and women equally. Goes on to say young women are more educated than men their age and report greater professional ambition and concern with personal success and growth. Religion and family are more distant or lower priorities. A recent Pew poll found that it was young men more than women who most aspire to become parents. Just read a little bit more from this. Many conservative denominations do not allow women to serve in leadership positions and offer little formal authority to these women. The Southern Baptist Convention, the largest Protestant denomination in the U.S., affirms an unambiguous gender hierarchy requiring women to submit to male leadership. For girls and women raised to believe they can do anything men can do, this message is becoming more difficult to digest. One more paragraph. In an interview with the Associated Press, Cheryl Summers, a former Southern Baptist, argues that these ideas are out of step with the experiences and ambitions of young women. Here's the quote. She said, "There's tremendous cognitive dissonance for a woman of faith who is leading professionally or through volunteer efforts when she experiences the glass ceiling and walls in her place of worship." That was a quote from Cheryl Summers, a former Southern Baptist. So there's a lot going on here, and you can dismiss it. You can dismiss it all. You can dismiss it all as radical feminists, right? Usurping male roles in society, and angry feminists out there campaigning to destroy traditional family values and traditional family itself. And that is part and parcel of what's going on. You see a lot of women out there who are so angry that they weren't born men that they're out there trying to destroy men. They're trying to destroy family. They're rebelling against God, and they just want a society that is completely genderless, right? Men and women all one and the same, or no men, all women, right? There's a radical element out there. So you can dismiss all this and say, well, it's due to these angry feminists or the rise of feminism, and in part that's true. And you can dismiss it, I think, a lot more to the fact that it is skewed biblical teaching, right? There are some hard parts for women to read in the Bible, women who aren't accustomed to reading the Bible, or women who are accustomed to reading the Bible but just can't get over certain portions of the Bible that talk about submission to men, and they take the word submission and they make it into something either in their own minds or because of faulty and skewed biblical teachings in their own places of worship. They make it into something that is the little mouse in the corner. Just yes dear, let me cook your dinner and let me take care of everything for you. I'll be an extension of your mother. I'll do all for you and treat you like you're a 2-year-old, a 5-year-old, a 10-year-old. And that in their minds, either from their own perceptions of biblical reading or own interpretations of biblical readings, or because that's what they've been told, that's how they see a submissive woman, a good Christian submissive woman. So there's a lot of that going on too. But the idea that more women are leaving the church nowadays than men, in the end, whatever the reason is, needs to be addressed, because women, by and large, are the ones that, there's no way around it. They're the ones that have children. They're the ones that, more often than not, in single-parent homes, are the ones that are left to raise the children, are the ones who have a much more day-to-day influence on child raising, on child rearing, particularly in the younger ages, than their male counterparts in the home, right? Their husbands, their significant others. It's just how it is. And so if you have women who are leaving the church in droves more than men, then what does that say for the fate of America's children? What does that say for the future faith in America, right? It's going to be harder to get youth back into church and to stay in church if you have women who think that church and biblical teachings and biblical truths just aren't for them. And it doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't. The reason that there are so many women who don't think that they can be all they can be in American society and still go to church and live a good Christian life, live out the biblical truths and biblical teachings of Jesus, and that those two things actually work together, it's because there's some faulty thinking going along there. Somewhere along the line, either in their own minds, in their own readings, or because somebody has taught them that. They don't think those two things can coexist. They don't think they can be a proper Christian woman and also a strong and bold American woman. I gotta say, this has to be one of the hardest concepts to live out. How to be bold, but at the same time, humble. And to me, it works whether you're male or female, right? It's a male or female thing. How to be bold in Christ, but humble before Christ. Because really, that's what we're talking about here, right? And I get how there can be some faulty logic among women because in the Bible, you're told to submit to your husband. But you have to remember that in the Bible, men, as women, are told to submit to God. So there's a lot of submission going on. And that's a word that doesn't sit well in America, by and large, right? Because Americans don't submit. Americans dominate. Americans are the best. Americans win. That's what we do. We're Americans. And so living that concept as an American, living the biblical truth of submission to God or to your husband or to your boss, right? You have to submit daily to somebody, whether it's God or a person in your life. Submitting is something that just it's hard for an American to do, an American with ambition and an American with intelligence, an American with that entrepreneurial spirit and, the competitive spirit to win, win, win. So that goes for male or female, but today we're talking about females, women in the church, women who are Christian, who are struggling to deal with that ideal, to deal with that concept, to live as a good Christian woman, to live out what God gave them as a purpose and mission to do in life, but still remain humble, still be that good Christian wife, that good Christian mother, that good Christian in general. And thankfully, there's a woman today who is, she's been an inspiration to me over the years. She was actually one of the first people to introduce me to National Religious Broadcasters, that great organization, right, where Christians in media and those of faith actually work in media. Her name is Misty Phillip, and she has a book out that I'm happy to discuss with her because it's called Spark Your Influence, and it's basically for Christian women how to live a life of excellence and purpose and courage, but still be a good Christian, still be a good Christian woman. Misty Phillip, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blonde. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you so much. Love your show. Love the title Bold and Blunt, because that's what we need to be in these days.
Yes, and thank you for that. And I love the title of your new book, Spark Your Influence, Inspiring Women to Lead with Boldness, Purpose, and Passion. It sounds like we're really in line here with the whole bold thing.
Absolutely. I think we've all have God-given gifts and talents and abilities to be used to further the kingdom and to stand up against injustices and cultural things that are happening in the world. And we're all going to do it in a little bit different of a way. But I think we're all called to use our gifts and talents and to be bold with them.
And you focus in on women in this book. So tell me why.
Yeah, it's funny. I've had a couple of men say, this could be for men too. And I think because I am a woman, and in the Bible it talks about older women are called to teach the younger women. And there were some things that I saw specifically for women, especially in being a woman leader, and how do you navigate working alongside men, especially when your role has maybe been diminished or men try to put you in a smaller box. And so for that reason, I think all of the principles in the book apply to both men and women, but that specifically, I felt like it's something that we don't talk about enough, but women need to know how to navigate working alongside their male leaders and how to earn their respect and also to be respectful.
It's interesting how you phrase that about being put in a box, because I find many churches, depending on the denomination, many churches automatically put women, married women I'm speaking of, as the silent partner of men. And you never hear them speak out. As a matter of fact, many of them are afraid to speak out because they will seem the opposite of feminine. Do you address that?
Absolutely. I talk about a lot of biblical examples of women over and over and over. You see in the Bible where Deborah was a judge of the nations, where Esther in her humility and boldness approached the king. So we have so many biblical examples. The woman at the well was the one who went and told everybody about Jesus. So why would our role as women today be diminished? And I think that it is a problem. I saw it both as a woman leader in the podcast industry. People would look at me and say, oh, aren't you sweet? You're a woman. But you're also a Christian. So on the business side, they didn't really take me as serious. And then in the church side, I would also see me not being perceived as a leader within the church. I don't know if they were threatened by my digital ministry, but it was a tension I had to hold in both sides. And so I did write about that in the book.
And how did you navigate that? Because I've heard that before, and I've seen it. I've seen it up close and personal that if you are a Christian woman and you have some sort of podcast or media production, that it is very difficult to be taken seriously or even to be, I don't know, welcomed by some male members of the church.
Yeah, I think the best example is the life of Jesus. So Jesus was humble, was full of humility. He washed his disciples' feet, but then at the same time, he was the same Jesus that flipped over tables in the house of God when it was being made a marketplace. So I think that there's this boldness aspect of Jesus, but also humility. And so I think that we don't need to play small. We don't need to shrink back. We need to be all that God created us to be, but we also, that includes being humble. And so we have to understand when and where to pick and choose our battles. And so it's a balance. It's a balance of both. It's not one or the other. I think it's being bold, but also being humble.
You know, there's an example that comes to mind, which I don't know if you'll remember, but it was years ago. There was this professional volleyball player, a woman, and she was making the media rounds. And part of the reason she was making such a media splash is that people found out that when she was at home, as strong as she was, and as obviously well educated and ambitious as she appeared, she said that her job in the home since she was married was to submit to her husband. First off, do you remember that? And second off, just even if you don't, it's difficult in this day and age in America, right, to navigate those waters of being bold and humble.
Yes, yeah. I don't remember that incident specifically, but I do know that being submitted to your husband, I am submitted to my husband as the leader in my home, yet he values me as an equal partner. And so it's not like he lords over me, but God, I feel, has positioned him to be a wise leader for our family and is accountable to the Lord for us. And in that work, we get to partner together in all of the things that we do. And I think we do a lot of work together. Now I'm actually working for his company as the chief operating officer. And it's really interesting to see the more that we partner together in the work that we do here on earth, the more blessings that I think that we have because we're doing it in partnership and together. So it's not a leadership that's a lordship over. It's just being submitted to one another.
I think that definition, and it's in Ephesians, right, where the definition of proper male and female roles is partly laid out. I think that's a very difficult passage for people to read and to put into place in a way that would please Jesus in real life. Would you agree with that?
I think so. I think we struggle with a lot in that male-female dynamic. And even it goes back to the garden where, women want to usurp over men. That's part of our curse, where the curse for men is having to work by the sweat of their brow. So I think that there's always going to be a struggle there. But when we humble ourselves to one another, I think that it can create a beautiful partnership.
What are some of the things you tell women about in your book? Spark Your Influence, inspiring women to lead with boldness, purpose, and passion. What are some of the principles, some of the recommendations?
Yeah, so we start off by talking about that we're all made in the image of God. And because we're made in the image of God, he is the ultimate creator of the universe. And so he's created us to create. Women are life givers. We actually create humans, right? But he's given each of us gifts and talents in different measures to be used for the kingdom for such a time as this. He has created women in this hour, I believe, to do mighty works, but it's understanding what your gifting is, what you're called to do, the season of life. I talk about transitions in life and how to navigate those transitions with grace. I give a lot of practical application for women who may be in a season of transition, for a young woman who is trying to balance all of the struggles of having a career and having a family and their faith, or older women who may have devoted their lives to their families and now their children are grown and they have an empty nest and they don't know what to do. So I offer some tips and tricks to kind of navigate those seasons with both wisdom and grace.
You said at the beginning of our conversation that part of the reason you were looking to write this book is because the biblical principle of the older women helping the younger women, guiding them. What mistakes do you see younger women making in this culture in America?
Yeah, social media, I think, is probably the biggest culprit, because it makes you feel like you're in community with other people because you're liking and you're commenting on their posts, but you're also being isolated. And for young Christian women communicators that I was working with in the Spark community, I would see how they were spending so much time online chasing these metrics, trying to get a platform, trying to get a book deal. They're told that they have to be in all the places doing all the things, but at the same time they have this young family, and that season only lasts for a short time. So I think social media has been a big distraction and also isolation in our life. So I'd like to see more young women in particular being present when they're with their family, being present when they're in community with other believers, and not just living a life of being online.
So, what would you say to women who perhaps have not been as blessed as you obviously have with a supportive husband, a marriage that actually seems in line with God's hope and plans for marriage? A lot of women out there, right? They're coming from homes where they're put down constantly, where they're told they're worthless, where their self-esteem is driven down. And here you come with this great book inspiring women to lead with boldness, purpose, and passion. But how do they get there?
Yeah, that is such a great question. I see a lot. I actually, within my own circle, I have a lot of women who have lived with a narcissist, who have been gaslit, who have just really been struggling. And so I think it's goes back to that beginning part of the book of understanding who you are and understanding that God created you in his image. And because we're created in the image of God, we have worth and we have value. And so I would have them start there with understanding that they are valuable, not because of anything that they do or anything that has been done to them, but because of whose they are, because they are in Christ. And then if they're in a difficult situation, I would advise them to seek wise counsel from trusted advisors within their church organization, so that they can get the help that they need and get the help that their marriage needs.
Do you think it's too much for women to, and I kind of hate this phrase because I never really understand what it means, but it's out there, so I'll just use it and you can define it how you want. But do you think it's possible for women to have it all?
No, I don't. I really don't. I mean, I'd like to say yes, because sometimes it looks like we have it all together, and that we can have it all. I think it's always a balance. I know that when I'm into my work, that I am, maybe not always taking the best care of my body, or if I'm fully into my work, I may be not doing as much for my family. And so I think that I had a boss in my early career who said, Misty, your life is like a wheel with all the different spokes, and each section is like a pie piece. And those pieces all need to be held in tension equally in order for your wheel to roll properly, because when you get one area out of balance, then it messes up your whole system. And so I am a very multi-passionate driven woman, and I can really focus in on my work, but I know if that takes up more of that spoke or that pie, that other things in my life will suffer. So I think it's a constant challenge for us to create boundaries, to learn to say no, especially when we are very passionate and very talented. A lot of people can pull on us. So understanding that it's okay to say no, and understanding sometimes that we will give more in one area than the other. But I think it's a myth to think that we're going to have it all.
Honestly, picturing that image, the wheel with the spokes and trying to keep them all with equal tension, just picturing that seems exhausting. So it's just, I like the title of your book, Spark Your Influence, the first part, because you very cleverly weave in a reference to your own media company, Spark Media. And just to give listeners a quick rundown, how can they find out about what you're doing with Spark Media, and how is that going?
Yeah, well, actually, it's fun that I penned the last words of this book when I actually exited Spark Media. So,
oh, okay. That's how it's going then.
Yeah, so my husband asked me to come and be the COO of his technology advisory services firm that specializes in cybersecurity. And he had asked me about it about a year and a half ago. And I really had to take time to pray to see if this was of the Lord, and what if I was supposed to do and how I was going to unwind, because Spark had become a big deal, a conference, a magazine, a network. And so it took me time to kind of unwind all of those pieces. So now this book is like my exclamation point to that Spark season, and kind of a good transition as I get my feet wet in technology.
Oh, what a neat ending. That's so cool. Well, Misty Phillip, your book is Spark Your Influence, Inspiring Women to Lead with Boldness, Purpose, and Passion. Available on Amazon. Anywhere else you want to note where it's available?
Yeah, Barnes & Noble. Should be able to find it in all the places.
All right. It's great speaking with you. I look forward to seeing you at the next NRB at least. And in the meanwhile, best of wishes with your new endeavor.
Thank you so much.
Misty Phillip, she's such a great person, such an inspiration. MistyPhillip.com is her website, and Phillip, just so you are aware, is Phillip. So MistyPhillip.com, MistyPhillip.com. That's her website. Check it out. And don't forget to pick up a copy of her book. Thank you for listening. I want to remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time.